Webby wobble. Wobble 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 wobble. Wobble wobble wobble. Wobble wobble. Hi, my name is Cappie, and today we're gonna revisit some good old memories by once again talking about how you can beat your addictions using Plants vs Zombies. To give you a quick recap of the first part, I talked about a couple of plans which all represented these different types of coping mechanisms and ways to deal with addictions. Then I also talked about the zombies, which represented the addictions, and I ended the video off by saying that the zombies will become better and better over time, that they will be harder to deal with, and that eventually you need to keep improving your lawn if you want to beat them. And that's where we're going to continue today, guys, because what does this actually mean? What does it mean that your addictions are getting worse and worse over time in real life as well? And for that, we're going to first take a look at the balloon zombie here. In Plants vs Zombies, the balloon zombie is a very annoying zombie to deal with because it has the unique ability of being able to fly. And that means that if you don't have the right counter for it, it can just easily bypass all of your defenses and eat your brains without you even realizing what just happened to you. And in real life, the balloon zombie represents something similar, which are the addictions that often go unnoticed in your own life as well. So these can be things like being addicted to the gym, for example, or being addicted to educational content on YouTube, for example. Because these things can easily be mistaken for something that is healthy and beneficial for you. And of course, to a certain extent, they are healthy and beneficial for you. But of course, if you're not careful enough, these things do have the potential as well to ruin your life. So that's why we're going to need a counter for this one, which is in this case the Cactus. Because the Cactus has this special ability where it is able to shoot spikes. And when it spots a balloon zombie, what will happen is that the Cactus will grow taller and pop the balloon with a spike so that eventually the rest of your defense can start attacking it as well. And in real life, the Cactus represents something similar here, which are awareness and self-reflection. Because what you have to understand, guys, is that when you do something like maybe journaling or meditation and you start doing some introspection and you become more aware of the things that you are doing in your life, you will eventually start noticing that maybe some of the things that you do are in fact like obsessions or addictions. So like going to the gym, for example, like I just said, and that you need to maybe stop doing them or like at least do them in a healthy way, so to say. So then eventually you will be able to pop the balloon in your real life as well. And you can start tackling those addictions by using the plans and the coping mechanisms, which I already talked about in part 1. Then moving on, there's also another annoying zombie that we have to deal with, and that is the disco zombie. The disco zombie is a special zombie that has the ability where he can spawn backup dancers around him, which can make him really hard to deal with, since you have to kill multiple zombies at once. And as long as you don't kill the disco zombie, he will keep spawning more and more of these backup dancers around him, which makes it very hard to get rid of. And this is something that we see happening once again in real life as well, because what we often see is that when somebody gets addicted to one thing, it often leads to multiple addictions. If, for example, you're addicted to video games, there's also a chance that you get addicted to things like social media and watching porn instead. And the thing is that if you don't fix this underlying problem that leads to all these addictions, which could, for example, be the dopamine cravings that you have, or the fact that you just constantly need new stimulation in your life, then new addictions will keep spawning into your life and it can become very overwhelming and very annoying to deal with. Like sometimes you might even think to yourself like, geez, man, this is just so hard to beat because there's just constantly all these new things around me that just keep coming into my life. I keep getting these urges to fall into different addictions and it's just very overwhelming. And once again, there is a solution, guys, because in Plants vs Zombies, we can use this mushroom called the Hypno shroom. Because the Hypno shroom has this special ability in the game that whenever a zombie eats it, the zombie will be turned into an ally and start eating other zombies for you. And especially against the disco zombie, this is a very useful ability since it will also turn all the backup dancers into allies. And in real life, we can use the Hypno shroom as well because what it symbolizes here is reusing knowledge. And sorry guys, I couldn't come up with a better term for this. Now, you see, whenever you know how to tackle one of your addictions, so maybe you planted a lot of walnuts and all these other plants, and you have this knowledge that, for example, video games aren't serving you in your life, you can then reuse that knowledge to also tackle other addictions in your life as well. Because what you have to understand here is that essentially all addictions work the same. They all give you some sort of pleasure in the short term and lots of suffering in the long term. So that means that if you know that something isn't serving you, so like I just said with video games, for example, you can use that same knowledge to tackle all of your other addictions as well. So once you kill the disco zombie here by using the Hypno shroom, you will end the cycle of new addictions being created all the time, and then you can finally live a more healthy and peaceful life again. And then suddenly all these addictions in your life, they don't seem that overwhelming for you anymore. But then guys, there's also another problem that we need to overcome here, and that is that some of these zombies are wearing metal armor. Think about like the bucket zombie, like the football zombie, the screen door zombie, the pogo zombie, and the ladder zombie, for example. Because they are wearing this metal armor, they are harder to beat because they have this extra layer of protection around them. And especially if they arrive in like very large numbers, it can be very pesky to deal with. And how we see this happening in real life is that addictions can also get stronger like this by not using metal armor, but instead using mental armor. And these come in the forms of these justifications, excuses, and all these deeply ingrained false beliefs that you have about your addictions. For example, when we look at the football zombie, the bucket zombie, and the screen door zombie specifically, these are unique because they have an extra layer of defense around them. And in real life, we can see this as like if you're addicted to video games, for example, you might start telling yourself things like, I need it to cope with stress, or I will start quitting tomorrow. And in that way, the addiction becomes harder to overcome because there's like an extra layer that you need to get through here. And then when we look at the pogo zombie and the ladder zombie, they are unique, of course, not just because they have something that's shielding them, but because they have these items that can be used to climb over your plants in the game. So that means that in real life, for example, when you gain some knowledge about how video games are bad for you, so once again, you planted a walnut here, they are able to bypass it by saying these things like, everyone does it, so it can't be that bad, or it's not as bad as other addictions. So it's basically ways to justify yourself to stay addicted, and in that way just bypass all of the knowledge you have about all the downsides of your addictions. And the longer you are addicted to something, the harder it will be to deal with these, because their armor will just keep getting better and better, just like the excuses in your life about your addictions will become more tempted to fall back into. So the way to solve this in a game is by using the magnet shroom. The magnet shroom is a special mushroom that has the ability to remove all metal objects of zombies, so that then they just become regular zombies, which means that then they are actually relatively easy to kill. And what the magnet shroom represents in real life when trying to quit your addictions, it is the Alan Carr method. So let me explain this to you guys. Alan Carr is a British writer that was addicted to smoking for almost 30 years in his life. And eventually he came up with this method that surprisingly made it very easy for him to quit smoking. And it was so effective for him that he decided to write a book about it. And this eventually became known as Alan Carr's Easy Way. And this method became so popular around the world, and it has helped millions of people around the world to stop smoking, that eventually more versions of this book were created, where like the same exact method was used to also get rid of other addictions. So things like drinking, technology like phone addiction, gambling addiction, and even porn addiction. And this method has helped me so much with specifically porn addiction in this case that I decided to make my own video course about it, where I give you this like hour-long guide on how you can finally get rid of your porn addiction by using Alan Carr's Easy Way. So if you're interested in quitting porn specifically, you can also watch this video after this one. So how Easy Way works in short is that the addiction is divided in two sides, which are the physical side, which are the dopamine cravings that you get when trying to quit your addiction, and also the psychological side, which is the like mental armor, which I talked about, which are like all the excuses and justifications that make it hard for you to quit an addiction. Now, according to Alan Carr, the physical side is actually the easy thing to deal with because the dopamine cravings will quickly end, because after just quitting for like a few weeks, your dopamine levels will return to the natural state again and you won't have these cravings anymore. And then the psychological side is the hardest part of this addictions because your mental armor will become stronger and stronger over time. And this is actually what keeps you stuck in the cycle of addiction, because these will just grow more advanced over time, and it's what convinces you to keep watching porn, for example, or keep playing video games. So what Alan Carr's Easy Way does is it specifically focuses on removing the mental armor by focusing on how like all these justifications and excuses that you have are actually false and that you shouldn't believe them, And by doing that, the zombies will just become regular zombies. Like in the game where the magnet shroom removes like the metallic objects from the zombies, they just become regular zombies, and then they're easy to deal with because then it's just the dopamine cravings again, so to say. If you're interested in learning more about this method in detail, I highly suggest you to start reading one of these books that I just mentioned. I will put some links in the description below. And once again, if it's specifically porn addiction for you, I will also link like the book on how to quit porn in the description below. And also you can of course watch my video if you want to. So now that we've added a couple of more plans to the list here and also covered how you can beat some of the more like advanced zombies in the game, you finally now have all the tools that you need in order to finally quit your addictions, guys. But unfortunately, there's still one more problem that we need to deal with here, guys. And that is that if you want to build your perfect lawn and like develop all these healthy coping mechanisms in your life, you're gonna need a lot of time and energy. As we can see in Plants vs. Zombies, and as I already said in part 1, sun is the thing that represents energy. The sun is needed to plant all your plants in order to build your defense and kill all the zombies. And in real life, once again, this is very similar because we're going to need a lot of time and energy to build all the healthy coping mechanisms as well. Like sometimes it can take a lot of time before we start learning about all the downsides of our addictions and before we start like diving deep into like healthy activities and hobbies that we can do. And when we start practicing meditation and develop more mindfulness, when we gain more clarity on how we can quit and all things like that. So that means that right now you're probably not at the place yet where you wanted to be. And that means that you're going to need some more time and energy before you can get there. Because in the game we can see that the zombies, they don't really care if you're not ready yet. Because they will just come at you in full hordes. And in real life, once again, addictions will just come after you relentlessly as well. Whether you are prepared or not prepared. For example, if you're an alcoholic and you're trying to finally quit drinking, then you might have made some progress in this area where right now there's certain scenarios where you find it very easy to stop drinking, but then there might also still be other scenarios in your life where it's actually hard to stop drinking. Maybe because you're at the bar with your friends, for example, and you always used to drink together with them. And there's also a lot of peer pressure involved that they try to convince you to keep drinking. And then maybe it's still a little bit hard to stop drinking whenever you're at the bar with your friends. So in this case, the bar represents like a lane in your lawn where you don't have that many strong defenses yet. And how we solve this problem in Plants vs. Zombies is that we use this plant called the garlic. It's a plant with a very interesting mechanic because it doesn't exactly deal any damage to the zombies, but when the zombies eat it, they immediately switch to a different lane. And this is a very interesting thing to use in the game since it allows you to protect a lane that might be a little bit more vulnerable, and it buys you some time to build a strong defense in that lane as well in the meantime. And in real life, the garlic symbolizes a very similar method to protect your weak spots in real life too, and that is called temporary avoidance. And sorry, once again, guys, I couldn't come up with a better term here. Now, what you have to understand is that if the bar, for example, is a weak spot for you when you're trying to quit drinking, then maybe you could say for a while to your friends that you don't want to hang out at the bar anymore for a while because you're trying to stop drinking. Or maybe if each time you drive home from work, you're passing the bar and then you get like the urge to start drinking again and going to the bar, then maybe you can decide to drive a different route to home from work, for example. So that then you get less urges and less tempted to start drinking again. In that way, you are more easily able to stay away from it. But of course, there's a reason here why I say temporary avoidance. Because when it comes to the garlic, it only works as a temporary strategy. Because after a while, it will get eaten and the zombies will be able to break through on that lane, which means that eventually you still need to put up a good defense in that lane. In real life, you can look at this in a way where after a while of quitting drinking, your friends might, for example, start nagging you and asking you questions like, "Hey man, when are you gonna come back? Like, we really miss you in the bar." Or maybe you arrive at a party or something and somebody offers you a drink and maybe you haven't had a drink in like half a year or something like that. And then suddenly you get like a very strong urge and it's very tempting again. So what's important here is that while you have your garlic set up here, you also work very hard on building your main defense in the meantime. So that means the things I covered in part 1, like getting good sleep, like doing healthy activities, gaining a sense of purpose in your life, learning about the downsides of your addictions and all stuff like that. And also all the plants I covered so far in this video as well. And then once you're able to like have that lane protected as well, then you can finally remove the garlic in your life and finally, for example, go to the bar again without having to worry that you're going to start drinking again. Because once you've developed all these coping mechanisms in your life, you can confidently go to the bar with your friends, and then when they start nagging you or like applying a little bit of peer pressure on you, like tempting you to go drink again, you can finally confidently say no to them. So once again, the garlic can be a great solution here if you're just starting out with like tackling your addictions and developing healthier coping mechanisms. But as long as you understand that you can't hide from your problems forever and you need to build that main defense as well, then eventually you will be fine. And now that brings us to the end of the video here, guys. I do hope that you've once again gained some valuable insights from this video and that the things that I mentioned today served as a good addition to the things that I already mentioned in part 1. Honestly, I had a ton of fun making this video and I would love to make another part, but I do feel like everything that I wanted to say has been said by now and that you do have all the tools that you need in order to build a strong lawn for yourself and finally get rid of all your addictions. So unfortunately, I don't really see another part coming out anytime soon, but if you have your own ideas about this and you feel like there is something that still needs to be added, or maybe if you have like a way to represent Plants vs. Zombies like a different way, so maybe not specifically related to addictions, but to tackling some other thing that's like self-help related in this case, feel free, of course, to leave a comment below. And that leaves me with only one thing left to say, and that is to stop watching YouTube videos and start implementing the tips I gave you in this video so you won't forget about this advice, and finally plant some seeds in your life. Stop thinking, start doing. Take care. Webby wow. Gosh, man. What am I even doing? I'm probably gonna get cancelled for this.